Hello. This is a video of an example Ally Skills workshop recorded without an audience. The reason we record it without an audience is that part of the format of the Ally Skills workshop is to allow people to feel safe making mistakes and taking risks. So we can't record a live audience. However, audience participation will be simulated in this video by extra slides that summarize example audience responses that I've seen in the 10 years of teaching this workshop. These slides are not included in the workshop when taught to a live audience. You can see the normal slides and a bunch of other materials at this URL. Just for the rest of this video, I will be pretending that I am teaching the workshop to a live audience. Hello, and welcome to the Ally Skills workshop. I'm Valerie Aurora. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I'll talk a little bit more about myself in a moment. The format of the workshop will be a 30-minute introduction, followed by about 2 hours of group discussion of real-world scenarios in which somebody could take action as an ally. We'll end with a 10-minute wrap-up, including a goal-setting exercise and question and answer period. We'll have a long break every hour and short breaks every half hour. So a little bit about me. My name is Valerie Aurora. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm the founder of Reframe Consulting, which is a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting firm that mostly teaches ally skills. I've taught ally skills to over 4,000 people around the world and across many different places in the US. Before I did this, I was a software developer and I specialized in Linux and file systems for over 10 years. I mention this because I want to talk about technical privilege. So if you work at a tech company, you probably have noticed this. We're more likely to listen to people who are technical, even in areas that are not part of their expertise. So if I, as a file systems developer, say, here's the file systems we should use for this project, you should probably listen to me. But if I, as a file systems developer, say, hey, here's how we should do hiring, or here's where we should go to lunch, I shouldn't get so much, people shouldn't listen to me in those areas more than anyone else. But we do, that's why it's called technical privilege. Technical privilege is complicated. For example, it interacts with other kinds of privilege. It's more likely to be granted to white men. As a white woman, I often have to say, to remind people that I used to be a software engineer. So I've just explained technical privilege to you. And in doing so, I have made it less powerful. And so I hope that you will learn how to do this with other privilege in the rest of this workshop. What is privilege? Well, we'll find out in a minute. All right, so what are ally skills? Let's talk about some terminology. Privilege is an unearned advantage, emphasis on unearned, given by society to some people, but not all. Oppression is sort of the background to privilege, or vice versa, depends on your perspective. One that you need both of them to make each other happen. Oppression is the widespread inequality that is present throughout society. It helps people with more privilege and harms those with fewer privileges. Within this context, a marginalized person is a member of a group that is the main target of a system of oppression. So systems of oppression hurt a lot of people, but there's a group of people it hurts the most. And then an ally is someone that society gives some privilege to, that is working to do two things: end oppression and understand their own privilege. So you notice these two things are actions. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So being a marginalized person takes no action. You just are marginalized. People do it to you. You can just be sitting in a chair and oppression will happen to you. But allyship is an action, not an ally. It's all about what you do. So that's why I talk about ally skills instead of allies. We're only being allies when we're taking action. Depending on the situation, you may switch between being a marginalized person and being able to take action as an ally. People often want to know, am I marginalized? Can I act as an ally? And the answer is, it really depends on the context. So I'll use myself as an example. As a white woman, if my race is most relevant to a situation in the United States and in many parts of the world, then I will be able to act as an ally, most likely. If my gender is what's most relevant to the situation, I'll more likely be a marginalized person and have a hard time making change. All right, so here's an example of these things. So privilege, here's a privilege you may have. The ability to interview for a job and have the interviewer assume that if you have children, you will continue doing a good job at work, have children now or in the future. Oppression might look like this: family expectations that mothers do more childcare, belief that mothers don't want to do paid work, financial systems unwilling to extend credit to mothers, laws that put more burdens on mothers than fathers, and paying men more than women. So this isn't a complete list, it's just a few of the examples of how this system of oppression works. A marginalized person here would be any woman who wants to work for pay for an employer, regardless of her plans for children. Systems of oppression don't care about our individual goals and ideas, they just stereotype us. So an ally then would be a man who does things like take on significant childcare responsibilities, donates to women's causes, votes for feminist candidates and laws, speaks up at work against stereotypes about mothers, and reads news articles about privileges that fathers enjoy and mothers don't. So you notice that there are more people in the world than men and women. At this point, we don't have strong stereotypes about non-binary people, about whether or not they are parents or will be good at working when they are parents. All right, so why would we focus on ally skills? There's a bunch of reasons for this. I have an entire talk about this called Focus on Ally Skills, but here's a very short version of this. In an experiment, researchers found that when marginalized people work to increase diversity, supervisors give them worse performance evaluations. But when more privileged people work to increase diversity, it does not harm the performance evaluations and it may improve them. So the really short version is that people, when they are in a position to act as an ally, they have more time, power, energy, resources, and people are more likely to listen to them, and they're much less likely to be harmed. So in this workshop, we're just going to focus on ally skills. We're just going to assume that oppression exists, it's bad, we should try to stop it, all that's possible to stop it. We're really going to avoid giving advice to marginalized people, even if they're asking. This workshop, we're really going to focus on what can somebody do as an ally. If you disagree with this, it's no problem. Just argue about it somewhere other than this workshop. As a note, I'm not a lawyer. If I were, I wouldn't give you legal advice in this workshop. And I don't know what your employer's rules are around human resources, people, that sort of thing. So I can't answer any questions about those. All right, so here's your first exercise, identifying your power and privilege. How do you know when you're going to be able to act as an ally? One of the issues with this is that often power and privilege are not as visible or are completely invisible to people who have them. So downloading this exercise and filling it out will help you figure out when you can take action. This exercise is voluntary, you don't have to do it. And when you're filling out this exercise, there's instructions on the top that include this as well. If people assume that you have a privilege that you do not, you can make your own decision about whether to check it off on the list. All right, give you a couple of minutes for that. So what did you think? Do you have more or less power than you thought? Do you have more or less privilege than you thought? Are there any surprises or things you hadn't thought about before? All right, here are some example audience responses. Most often I get something like, I was surprised by how many boxes I checked. I am used to thinking about the ways that I am at a disadvantage, but this showed me I have more power than I think. And then a couple of questions I often get. Why did you include not a mother as a privilege? So this is a tough one because motherhood is not equally available to all, and it is highly rewarding for many people. What I'm talking about is in the context of the workplace. If you are not a mother, you have advantages because the workplace is designed for people who are not primary caregivers, and women are stereotyped when they are caregivers as the primary caregiver. So this is not, there's no criticism of being a mother. It's just saying that society does not treat mothers very well. Another question is, why do you include educated as a source of power or privilege? So there's a section of on this worksheet of things that are a combination of power and privilege. So a combination of things that you worked for and things that were kind of given you. So education is not equally available to all. At the same time, many of us worked very, very hard for our education. So it's just recognizing that while you did work very hard for your education, if you have privilege, it was easier for you to get, and there were fewer challenges put in your way. All right. So we're just going to talk about the basics of ally skills right now, and in the scenarios, we'll go into way more detail. But this is just to get you started. So when you're acting as an ally, the first good idea is to be short, simple, and firm. Often we think that we need to come up with some sort of like long, complicated response that takes into account all of the options and includes 7 research citations. Often all you need to do is say, we don't do that here, or, no way, man, or something as simple as, wow. It's much easier to say something simple. So if you lower the standards for your response, you're more likely to respond at all. It's better to say something than nothing. Don't even try to be funny. So there's some interesting issues with humor. Often when we're trying to be funny, we are making fun of a marginalized group. For example, somebody might respond to sexism by making a homophobic joke. That doesn't help anybody. So I'm just saying, take the pressure off yourself. Don't even try to be funny. If you do try to be funny, try to get somebody else to review your joke to see if it's classist or something like that first. So play for the audience. Often when we are responding to something, we're focusing on the person who's just done something terrible. The issue with that is that often that person is not going to change their mind. But people who are watching often have not made up their mind, and they're standing around wondering, yeah, do we make homophobic jokes around here? And if you say, we don't do that here, we don't make homophobic jokes, they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, that's what I thought. So it's much easier to change their minds. So once you've come up with a few simple responses for common situations, you get to practice them. So when you're brushing your teeth or walking down the street or in the elevator, something like that, you can say, we don't do that here. We don't do that here. We don't do that here. And then when the situation actually arises, it'll be much easier for you to say something or do something. Finally, pick your battles. So you are a finite human being with finite time and energy. You can't, and oppression is everywhere. It surrounds us constantly. You can't fight it all of the time. What we're looking for is the situations in which you have the most power and the most chance of making a difference. So the biggest return on your effort. And to act at those times and then recover for the next time that you get to take action. All right, so I mentioned a little bit about this, talking about why I don't recommend even trying to be funny. When you're trying to help one group as an ally, don't harm another group. So here's a list I try to run down when I'm thinking in advance. What am I going to do in this situation? Is my response sexist, homophobic, transphobic, racist, ableist, ageist, classist, casteist? Yeah, and if am I criticizing someone's body or attractiveness? If I am, that's probably not helping anybody. So just spend some time to think about this. One that's particularly difficult is classism and ableism. All right, so I've just been talking about a lot of difficult stuff, including like racism and transphobia. So I'd like to have a little break. These are fennec foxes. They're my favorite fox. I think they're the cutest fox by far. They are very, very fluffy, and they have gigantic ears, which is on topic because an important ally skill is listening. So be inspired by the cute fennec foxes. So at this point, a lot of people ask, what if I make a mistake? And the answer is acknowledge, apologize, and move on. If you wait until you're perfect to start acting as an ally, you'll never start acting as an ally. So what's important is to learn what to do when you do make a mistake. So I just want to share one of my mistakes that was relatively embarrassing for me. So I used to help run a conference that was mostly women. You can see a photo from one of these conferences. And in this conference, we asked people to try not to say you guys. It's not a huge deal, but we were just making an effort. During this conference, I was on the microphone talking to everybody and said you guys about 5 times in a row. Fortunately, a friend tapped me on my shoulder, whispered to me that I had done this. And I said, hey everyone, I know we asked you to not use you guys. I know I just did it several times. I'm really sorry about that. I thought I had done a better job of getting this out of my vocabulary, and I'll keep working on it. All right, so let's move on to the next part of the conference. And that was it. So yeah, just when you make a mistake, apologize, acknowledge it, correct yourself, move on. All right, so we'll all take about a 3-minute break here, and I highly recommend getting up, moving around, and then coming back refreshed. Okay, so this is we're going to talk about some guidelines for our group discussions that we're about to start in a few more minutes. So help us create a safer space. Here are some rules for the workshop. You can leave or return at any time without explanation. You just don't need to say why. This workshop is designed to be voluntary. If you aren't here voluntarily, see rule number 1. You only have to share information in the groups if you feel comfortable doing so. If you know something that's relevant, but you don't feel like you can handle talking about it right now, that's fine. Please anonymize any stories you tell in this workshop or you repeat outside the workshop. Joining groups is optional. You can just not accept the invitation. And tell me using the chat if you don't want to be in a group with someone. I often recommend that people aren't in the same group with somebody that they report to. And there's plenty of other reasons that you might not want to be in a group with someone that say nothing bad about either of you. All right, so in each of your group discussions, each group, the first thing you'll do is choose a note taker and a moderator. The moderator's job is to interrupt people who are speaking too much and invite others to speak. Over video, the problem is usually people not speaking enough. So be prepared to kick off the discussion by asking somebody what they think. Sometimes the moderator speaks too much, so feel free to moderate the moderator. We just want to have somebody who feels like it's their job. The note taker writes down a summary of what you talked about and reports out that out when we come back to the main group. The note taker should be someone different each time because it's hard to participate fully in the discussion if you are taking notes. There aren't any misleading scenarios. I'm not trying to trick you. You in the scenario means a potential ally. That might literally be you, or you might be talking about a theoretical person. Sometimes there's nobody in the group who themselves could act as an ally. That's normal. Focus on what an ally can do, not what a marginalized person can do. If the whole world wants to give advice to marginalized people, we're just going to carve out this time for talking about what allies can do. If necessary, make up additional details about the scenario. Sometimes people want to know, for example, if somebody's a manager, just decide for yourselves if that person is a manager or not, and then let us know in your report out. You'll get a 1-minute warning from Zoom when the discussion is almost up. Just keep talking during that 1 minute and you'll be returned to the main room automatically. Finally, note taker, write down your breakout room number. It's hard to remember, and we do report outs by breakout room number. All right, we're ready for our scenarios and group discussion. So here's our first scenario. What could an ally do? At a meeting, a woman makes a suggestion, but no one picks up on it. Later on in the meeting, a man makes the same suggestion and is given credit for it. So first question is, how many people have seen this? Raise your hand or in the video or type in the chat. Or something else. This obviously happens a lot more in a lot more situations than just men and women. All right, great. Okay, so a lot of people have seen this. My next question is, who could best act as an ally in this situation? Here are some example responses. The meeting leader. That's good. That's somebody who has power and influence. A man. This is the question I want to to, this is the answer I want to get for sure. A manager. This is somebody with relative power. These are all three correct. This fourth one, I get a lot, but it's wrong. Anyone can act as an ally and should in this situation. So it's true that anyone can act. They're just not going to have the benefits and power of being an ally if they don't have relevant power or privilege. Part of what we're trying to do in this workshop is take all of the pressure off marginalized people to speak up and act in situations where they have the least power. We're trying to get people who have more power and privilege to take action. So I really want people to focus on who has power, who has privilege. All right, so here are some example summarized group report outs and how I might respond to them. So we talked about how this could be happening accidentally, so we should assume good intent. So it is true that often this happens subconsciously. People are not paying attention to other people speaking. Often there's a lot of good research showing that people simply stop listening when less powerful people are speaking, or people that they think are just not important are speaking. So whether or not it's happening consciously or subconsciously, it's part of a pattern that's caused by this system of oppression called sexism. Assuming good intent, it has a lot of issues with it. There's a link in the handout to an article talking about the problems with good intent. If you search for good intent and how it harms diversity and inclusion, you'll get a long explanation of the issues with that. But basically, the problem is people who experience a lot of oppression often get a lot of people being concerned about the good intent of the person who has been harming them. So we need to focus less on that. All right, another common response. We talked about a lot of issues, but didn't come up with an answer for what to do. So this is fine when this happens. So I will do my example response here. That's great. I'm really glad that you talked about the issues that were happening and became more aware of them. And we'll see what the next group has to say. All right, here's another response. The ally should say, hey, I think so-and-so was talking about that earlier, but we couldn't decide if asking the original person to speak would be putting them on the spot. I really like trying to direct the conversation back to the person who originally had the idea, even if they don't want to speak about it. You're just acknowledging that they had the idea first. The way that you handle the situation of, am I putting this person on the spot? Do they want to speak? Is you ask them. So my favorite response for this is something like, oh, hey, I'm glad you're picking up on so-and-so's idea that they brought up earlier in the meeting. So-and-so, is there anything you'd like to add? And then that makes it really comfortable for them to either say, yes, there is something I'd like to add, or no, that's fine, just keep going. So that's the answer to a lot of the, oh, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing for this marginalized person. The answer is ask them. All right, so here's an overall tip for this situation. Meetings without explicit structure inherit their structure from society at large, and that means they're reinforcing the systems of oppression that are happening. So you have to make a special effort to fight oppression in your meetings, and that means structures. So you can use things like agendas. They seem super boring, but that gives everyone time to prepare and to prepare the things that they want to speak about. Meeting roles that we are using today, I'll talk about those more in a moment. Reserve speaking time for people. So for starting each meeting with 1 minute for everyone to speak if they want to. You can use hand signals. I love the hand signal where there's I want to speak, maybe as a hand, and then I just have a quick note right now that just very briefly I need to say is one finger, something like that. So I want to talk a little bit more about meeting roles. Facilitator is somebody who runs the meeting and moves it through all the different topics. The moderator is the way I'm using this term. You don't have to use it this way, is the person who is paying attention to whether everyone's getting a chance to speak. So looking around, seeing if there's somebody who wants to speak, keeping track of how much time people are spending speaking. The note taker takes notes. The important part about this role is there needs to be a fair way to distribute this work. So if there's somebody whose literal job is taking notes, that's great. If not, there needs to be a fair system, such as a round robin or a list or rolling a dice, something like that, to choose who's going to take notes. Finally, the timekeeper is somebody who pays attention to how much time is available for each topic and reminds people that they need to start wrapping up so that they're able to get to everything. So one person can do multiple of these roles. These roles can be split up between multiple people. I especially love having more than one note taker with a shared document. In this workshop, I'm the facilitator and the timekeeper, and then each of you has a moderator and a note taker. So you can learn more about these roles at my website under meeting skills. All right. So as we go forward with the rest of our discussions, I just want to raise your awareness of the dynamics that are happening within them. So ask yourself, who's speaking the most in your group? Is someone having difficulty being heard? Are there any patterns you're noticing related to gender, race, age, or anything else? And how do these discussions compare to ones you have in other contexts, such as at work or at home or in your hobbies? Do you like it? All right. We're going to take a long break, about 10 minutes, and then we will get started again. All right, welcome back. Here's our next scenario. What could an ally do? You were in a meeting about hiring more people from a marginalized racial group into positions of power at your company. A colleague of yours says, it's great to hire more people from this group, but let's not lower the bar. Before you can reply, another colleague says, oh yes, we'll be careful not to lower the bar. All right, so my first question here is, what is the system of oppression that's happening in this scenario? So people will often, people are often very uncomfortable with talking about racism, so it takes a long time for them to say racism. There's a long silence there. Then eventually I get that, or I have to say it myself. Then I ask who could act as an ally. I might get more long silence. People will often say the meeting leader. That's always a good choice. A manager, another source of power. This is what I definitely want to hear people say. Someone not from the marginalized racial group. So in the United States, this is often going to be a white person in all cases. Someone from the dominant racial group is another way to put it. But I really need people to be able to say racism, dominant racial group, or the name if the scenario talks about a specific racial group, to be able to say that. All right. When people come back, here are some of the things that they say. Very often we talked about the benefits of racial diversity and about telling this person who said this about them, but we didn't get to an answer about what to do now, and we realized that actually that's not the question. Yeah, people will often go into a lot of business cases for justifying this, when actually the issue is something else entirely, which I will talk about in a moment. We couldn't decide whether to say something in the meeting or take them aside afterwards. So this comes up in a lot of the discussions around scenarios. This is something that I would respond to this way, which is, yeah, so often we don't have to choose whether we're going to do something now. We can actually do something now and take them aside later. We can take them aside later and then take it to their manager, depending on the results, right? The thing I like to keep in mind is who is going to be harmed if I don't do something now. And in this particular situation, it's discussing hiring. And so it could have a huge impact on people's lives. All right, so here's another group report out I'll get. We suggested to ask that person to explain why they think we might have to lower the bar. So I love this one. Asking somebody to explain their bigoted assumptions instead of just making those assumptions for them often makes somebody realize what they're doing, or they're too embarrassed to just spell it out. So the assumption that they have here, well, I'll talk about that in a moment, but I just want to say first that the caveat on this technique, asking someone to explain, I don't get it. What do you mean? Don't do that if there's somebody present who is the target of their bigoted opinion. You may still do it, but they don't need to hear again all of the terrible ideas that people have about them. All right, so the problem here is that there's an assumption that at present, everyone has an equal chance of being hired regardless of race. So this is a goal, but it is not the reality because you're having this meeting. If this was true, then it would simply be that it would be the case that people in this marginalized racial group were not as good in some fundamental way. And that's what people are saying by let's be careful not to lower the bar, is that they think the issue is just that people aren't as good in this group. The reality is that when you look at vast amounts of research, racialized people face a much higher bar than members of the dominant race in the hiring process and a bunch of other places. Just an amazing number of ways getting into schools, just any kind of barrier is going to be higher for marginalized people. So I talk about myself in this situation. As a white person, I have skipped large parts of the hiring process before. And I don't think that would have happened if I were a Black woman or a woman of color in the United States. So the reframe I like to use here in this situation is actually the problem is that people in this group have to pass a higher bar and we need to fix that. So really coming in and saying like, hey, the problem is in our hiring process. There are lots of qualified people. We can hire more of them if we fix the problems in our process that are creating this issue. All right, so at this point, there's going to be 1 to 3 more scenarios, depending on the length of the workshop. We'll have more breaks, all that sort of stuff. All right, so thanks everyone for sitting through this long workshop. It was really great to hear all of your ideas. We're gonna do a goal setting exercise, and this is gonna help you start planning how to use ally skills in your life. So we'll start by downloading the goal setting exercise at this URL. Spend about 5 minutes filling it out and type done in chat when you are done. Again, this is optional. You don't have to do it. All right, it looks like enough people are done with the goal setting exercise. So we'll do some advanced ally skills and then we'll have a question and answer period. So our first ally skill is speak less and listen more, except when speaking is risky. So if speaking up is going to get somebody more power, more money, more recognition, that's a great time to take a back seat and promote somebody who's more marginalized than you. If speaking up is going to get rotten tomatoes thrown at you, then that's the time that an ally should probably be taking action, especially since you're probably going to get a less bad response. Treat ally actions as a bare minimum expectation. So often when you start acting as an ally, people will be really impressed and will want to praise you and say how great you are and give you rewards and all that sort of stuff. My recommendation is to respond with, what? That's just normal. Everybody who has this power should be doing that. There's 2 reasons to do this. One is it takes the focus off you as the ally and the more privileged person. And then the second reason is that it encourages other people to start taking action as well and to help you out. So less, oh my gosh, you're an amazing ally, and more, what, everybody should do this. I recommend that you follow and support leaders from marginalized groups. They have the most information about what they need. Something I see in the tech world quite a lot is some people not from the marginalized group showing up and saying, hey, I wrote you an app. And inevitably, the app does not do anything that is useful to this marginalized group. So what you should do is find people who are already doing this work, support them, recommend them, all that sort of stuff. Follow your discomfort. If something makes you feel bad, find out more and understand why before reacting. So sometimes when we're trying to act as an ally, we actually do something that's harmful and somebody might let us know. Often your first feeling there will be like guilt or shame, and then your second feeling will be anger. And really what you need to do is sit with that and figure it out and be thankful that somebody told you that you were doing harm. But sometimes the reason that you feel guilty, angry, ashamed, something like that, is because somebody's being a total jerk to you. So what I recommend is take your time, figure it out before you react. And of course, when you make a mistake, apologize, correct yourself, and move on. Acknowledge what you did. If you know the right answer, if you know how to fix it, do it right then. Or if not, figure it out later. Just don't make it about yourself and your feelings. Keep the focus on acting as an ally. All right, so we'll have questions and answers until everyone is done. Thank you all for being a great audience, and give yourselves a round of visual applause. All right, thank you.